Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Yandell. I'm new to this game. I haven't spoken about my military service in public ever before, so I was told to talk about the struggle in returning home from war, moral injury, so I'm just going to try to use this time efficiently to explain what that means to me, but I want to express my gratitude for this opportunity to speak. It means so much to me that there's people out here ready to listen, but I better get started. When I talk about any moral injury I might have experienced, there's two things that come to mind, and that's the passage of time and disillusionment. And they're really two essential parts of one equation. What happened to me, I can best describe as disillusionment over time. I can't really speak objectively about my return home from Iraq anymore. I returned to the States from one 6-month deployment to Baghdad and surrounding areas in 2004. That feels like a long time ago now. So I experienced war once in a specific place, in a specific time. And I'm coming to grips still with the fact that I have the rest of my life to ponder the consequences and the ramifications of that time and my involvement in it. I probably couldn't have given you a concise report of my struggle to return home, even right after I returned home, and now 8 years after the fact. The best I can do is just reflect emotionally and spiritually about the fluctuation of meaning that's occurred over the past 8 years. When I speak of disillusionment, I want to clarify that I am not disillusioned with the United States military's ability to carry out a specific mission or a specific objective. I'm also not disillusioned of my admiration and my love for my fellow brothers and sisters in arms. Pardon me. What I'm disillusioned with, and what started to erode for me in my time in Iraq in 2004, is my younger self's perception of good and evil. I don't think that's altogether a bad thing, but that's the best way I can describe my moral injury. So now I'm going to go back and tell a life story. So I grew up collecting comic books, and I still love comic books. Those who know me can attest to that. Superman and the X-Men are my favorites. They still are. Those icons, they take on evil time and again. They save the world, they protect the innocent, they empower people to fight another day. I also like King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. They were mighty figures, but Arthur knew that might does not always equal right. So the knights were given specific quests and rules of engagement. For example, to always help a damsel in distress. The common thread among those superheroes when the Knights of the Round Table is that the morally right act, the good act, was always obvious. It was the execution of the task that was challenging, beating the bad guy. But it was never easy. It was never hard to identify that bad guy in all these stories. So that's what my 19-year-old self, when I went to Iraq, that's the way I thought. I thought that I could act with confidence and certainty in a morally right and justified way. Any specific task might be challenging, but knowing that it was right was simple. I viewed the U.S. military as mighty. I was convinced that it was always going about protecting the weak, serving the right. I carried a Gideon's New Testament in my pocket. I read it all the time. But rather than give me pause to consider the rightness or wrongness of the war, I simply read into the text my justification for being a soldier. After all, I felt that we were liberating the poor, the weak, and the oppressed. Hence the title, A Record of Freedom. It seemed obvious that the God revealed in the New Testament was all for those things. On a daily basis, explosive ordnance disposal technicians such as myself were cleaning the streets of death-dealing devices, saving lives of property and property. Of course, that was a morally right action. I was one of the good guys, so I thought. In the years following my return, however, I found it and still find it harder to capture that feeling of moral certainty and confidence. I found it hard to even imagine what it felt like. What comes to mind is not the fact that we removed dangerous devices or that we saved lives. It's the fact that almost all of those munitions and explosive material were manufactured either in the Soviet Union or the United States, long before they were used as improvised explosive devices and planted on the streets of Baghdad. What comes to mind is also the question, would they have ever been placed on the streets of Baghdad had the U.S. military not been present? But the images that spring to mind most frequently for me are the images of Iraqi children. And there are always large groups of them present anytime my team leader and I responded to an incident. They'd usually be asking for candy, all the time asking for candy. I never acted violently against them, but I was always mad at them. They were in my way. I had a specific mission to do. Now I find myself asking, what does it mean for a child to consistently witness that explosive force and destruction? Even if that destruction is serving to remove dangerous devices from their streets, what does it mean for their sense of belonging in the world to see doors kicked down, see black bags placed over the heads of families? I remember after a few months of being in country actually feeling that I belonged there more so than they did, that they were just getting in the way. Those are thoughts I've wrestled with for the past 8 years, and I continue to wrestle with for the rest of my life. I wonder now how I was ever able to do anything and be sure that it was the right thing. My disillusionment with my previous perceptions of good and evil, it runs very deep, and it runs deeper each year. Every time I see an act of violence in the world on the news, I hear dialogue about how that act can best be responded to as if it occurs in a bubble. Evil person X commits evil act Y, and we respond with morally justifiable action Z. Thus ends the dilemma, and we move on. I want to scream, and sometimes I do at the television, that this has happened before. This is 2004. This is the Vietnam War. This is 1945. When violence against our embassies began happening globally a couple months ago, a friend of mine here at seminary said that he thought the world had gone insane. But for me, the insanity of the world is hardly news. In AA meetings, we describe insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. We here consistently cry out for peace by declaring war, as if one war will somehow, someday, magically bring about peace. Is it not obvious by now that violence begets violence? Anytime I hear of violence across the seas, it occurs to me that 10-year-old children I encountered in Iraq are now 18 years old enough if they lived here to take up arms and fight no more. If I encountered one of those children today, I'd have no idea what to say, what the right or good action would be. The best I could do is just throw up my hands and admit that I don't have any answers. I would plead with them to live a flourishing and happy life and hope that I didn't do anything in my past to prevent that. The words good and evil have no place in a discussion about war, not for me, not anymore. I'm not sure they have much place anywhere for me. The moment one people group can be labeled evil and another good is the moment people start dying. I'm not naive enough to believe that we can stop death, but I believe that we can advocate for life, much more so than we do now. I'd like to close just by describing a frustration I have that really doesn't have to do with moral injury, but I'm going to indulge myself. I kind of lump these actions under one category, and I call it speaking for the dead. And it happens in the media, and it happens in casual conversation all the time for me. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean by speaking for the dead. We say, our men and women in the armed forces are dying for freedom. Or those religious zealots are dying for their hatred of America. Or what's most problematic for me is men and women in war anywhere are dying for nothing. Language like this, in my opinion, steals something very sacred and personal from the dead. It's like digging up their graves and stuffing words in their mouths. When we speak in such vague terms of large groups of people who died, we're promoting some agenda of our own. And we're lacking the conviction necessary to speak of that agenda. We force the dead to carry it for us. I invite any and all of you to ponder what soldiers and surgeons or civilians believed they were dying for in the moments of their deaths. Simply ask. And in our asking, we meet profound silence. The dead are not here to speak. I implore us to speak only from our lives and let the dead rest peacefully. And I want to close with a short poem from David Yoss's collection called You Are Not Here, which says that a little better than I can. Blessed be the glass that breaks on the stone, and blessed be the stone. And blessed be the sound the glass makes breaking on the stone. And blessed be silence, the one language lovers must learn. And blessed be death, who teaches us to speak it. And blessed be the poet who journeyed to her dark country and returned with words so silent, they echo what can't be said. Blessed be the fire which purifies words and transforms their sand into glass, through which we can see our faces. And blessed be he who permits the glass to fall. Thank you.